talk Buckeyes consistently here at the Voice of College Football. Please like, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe right here. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports to update us on spring football. Pat, how you doing today?
Good. Another week in the books almost, and actually we might get to see some of spring football. It sounds like they're going to let a few of us into to practice tomorrow and maybe a few more on Monday. So might actually get to see some of this stuff instead of just hearing other people's accounts of it, which will be nice.
I get my weekly updates from Steve Hellwagon on the probability or possibility that you guys will be able to get anything close to what used to be normal access to the football team, which obviously makes it much easier on you guys to do your jobs. Unfortunately, I say update off the top. It's more of an injury update than anything else in regards to the news. Cameron Babb, off injured wide receiver, and Sevyn Banks, who's an integral part of the secondary.
Yeah, two stories that just came out here recently. Unfortunate news for both guys, especially Cameron Babb. I'll get to Sevyn Banks in a second because he's kind of the bigger name. But for those who haven't really followed, Cameron Babb's career was a pretty highly recruited corner out of St. Louis, or wide receiver, out of St. Louis, and was expected to be a factor in this Buckeye offense. But he suffered two leg injuries, one of them being an ACL in high school, and then came to Ohio State, got hurt right before his freshman year, another ACL injury, and then again the next year. So that's three ACL injuries in a 3-ish year span, which is tough to come back from. And but he did, and was a part of the team last year, obviously with the way things went. Didn't do a ton offensively, was a big special teams guy, and had been doing well this offseason, did well in winter workouts, was expected to, break into, or at least have the chance to break into, what is a pretty deep wide receiver rotation. And then now another injury. Ohio State hasn't gone into any sort of detail about what the injury is. I had heard that, it's not great, but I didn't get a ton of detail on that. So unfortunate news for him. Hopefully he gets back and is able to kind of build on the momentum he was building here over this offseason and even some last year. But Ohio State obviously has a deep wide receiver rotation. So from a Buckeye perspective, they should be fine. But you do lose a guy, at least for now, that is a veteran and whatnot. On the other side of the ball, Sevyn Banks will also miss spring practice. Again, Ohio State didn't confirm what the injury was. I was told it was a kind of a nagging knee issue that had bothered him for a little while, but he'd been able to play on it. Now it's just gotten to the point where it wasn't worth having him go through spring practice. There's a good and bad, I think, to this. Obviously, you don't want to be hurt, and Ohio State's working to fix this secondary after the issues of last year. Sevyn Banks was probably one of the brighter spots of the secondary with the way he played as a first-year starter. So, he does have experience. So, it's not like it's a guy who was trying to work his way into kind of the rotation there. But new secondary coach Matt Barnes is taking over. You'd like to have Sevyn Banks in there to work with him. The positive spin on it is that this will give more opportunity to some of the younger corners, Legend Cavazos, Ryan Watts, Denzel Burke, a true freshman who's already there, Cameron Martinez, who's moving around, and I think we're going to talk about some of those guys later. But this, that's kind of the positive is you'll get more reps because Sevyn Banks won't be out there for some of these younger guys. Also, remember, Cameron Brown tore his Achilles or hurt his Achilles last year against Penn State, is out still with that. So it's going to be a lot of young guys in the secondary, especially at corner this spring with this most recent injury.
Got Pat Murphy on the line talking Ohio State football. Join Pat and the rest of the crew there at 247 Sports Bucknuts, who, by the way, broke the story on the injuries to Sevyn Banks and Cameron Babb on Thursday mid-afternoon. Pat, let's transition straight from the injury to Sevyn Banks, integral part, hopefully, of the secondary play this fall, into the secondary interviews that you conducted this week in the Ohio State media with new secondary coach Matt Barnes. And I got to think that was maybe one of the more interesting sessions that you've had and will have this spring, just because of so much attention given to a group that struggled last year.
For sure. Kerry Combs kind of ran that with Matt Barnes as kind of an assistant, running the back end of the defense. Now they've readjusted things. Greg Madison obviously gone. They've shifted stuff around in terms of how they're divvying up positions, and Matt Barnes moves from what was mostly special teams to now coaching the secondary. And we've talked before. I think this is a good move. I think from people I've talked to, that Matt Barnes, known as a good teacher of football, will do a good job, especially this time of year, of teaching these guys. And that's something he really stressed today, was that it's not so much about depth charts and schemes and stuff right now. It's more the technique, the teaching of football is kind of how he put it. And so that's been what they've worked on a lot here. These first, I think they're into practice 7 on Friday of spring practice. So that was the main thing he talked about. And the players, we talked to Marcus Williamson, slot corner, and safety Josh Proctor, and they kind of echoed that it's been a lot of focus on those type of things, that kind of the fundamentals and the football side of things, more so than figuring out who's going to go where. That'll come down the road in terms of positions. They're well aware that they did not play up to Ohio State standards last year, and that has to be fixed. Marcus Williamson said that's in the past. While the Buckeyes are aware of it, Josh Proctor even said, that Alabama game is something they're using as motivation. While they're aware of it, they're focused on what they can control now and getting better moving forward. And that's a day-to-day thing more than, all the way looking towards next season. So, I think it's a smart approach by Ohio State, really getting down to kind of the nitty-gritty of playing the position and getting all that, out of the way here early in spring before you really start to dive into the scheme of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, which will be very important. But you obviously have a lot of time before you open the season against Minnesota in early September.
I'm sure you get pelted with those questions almost on a daily basis, because I don't even cover Ohio State consistently. And it's almost every day that people are asking about schemes and what are we going to do to change the scheme, because it's always the scheme. We can play a better system. So what are we going to do to fix the system? So we're still in spring football. We've got 6 months to go until these guys are going to be on the field for games at least. And so, yeah, one step at a time, and teaching the fundamentals right now. And again, the thought process for some might be, hey, these guys have played so much football and they're top-notch prospects. Do we really need to teach that much? And yeah, you really do. The coaches talk about that with every position, that pretty much starts once they get back to conditioning in January and into spring ball in February and March, that they're going back to teaching stances, even to the rudimentary of football, to make sure that everything's buttoned up.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And, I think if you let that get sloppy, you don't work on that throughout, the year at some point, that's when you start to have issues. It's the little details, I think, that make the difference when you get into big games. You can get by playing some teams in the Big Ten without some of the fundamentals, some of the details. But, when you get down the road and play some of the Big Ten championship, some of the better teams in the Big Ten, the college football playoff, that's where details become very important. And, one thing I think that probably doesn't get talked enough about is they missed that time last year, not only last spring, but any works that they would have done in the summer, until they were allowed back in June at the facility, that wasn't there. And obviously they can't work with coaches in the summer, but they can work with each other. They can do different things, and I think that certainly hurt a secondary that, really only had one starter back, and he was playing a new position. So, you hope, and it sounds like that they're handling this right this offseason and taking advantage of the fact that you do have spring ball and you can get better at those things that maybe, as you said, fans don't think about, but are very important.
Yeah, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, have that become muscle memory and not something that they have to think about, because any coach will tell you a thinking athlete on defense is probably a step slow. If they're thinking too much, there's got to be a thought process there to a certain extent. All right, we got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts, 247 Sports, and Pat is kind enough to give us his time just about every week to talk Ohio State football. And of course, the spring game's coming up in a few weeks. You can get a Buckeye mask at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Just register for free. You'll see that signal at the top of the screen, 20% off your first purchase, and you get entry into a gift card for a $25 gift card. All right, Pat, we move on to the tight ends. And we were talking about this week on our Buckeyes live show, and the litany and legacy of Ohio State tight ends is not nearly as strong as maybe it is in some positions, but it's still a wealth of talent that's gone on to the NFL. But in terms of being targets and putting up big numbers at the collegiate level, the NFL scouts can survey the talent and still move them on to the next level, but they're not approaching NFL locker rooms with 50 and 60 catches per year. That's just not been the history of Ohio State football. So again, we've got another group of talented tight ends, and we'll see how much they get the football, but it's being talked about at least getting them the football and being more active here in the spring.
Another spring, another session of talking about tight ends catching footballs. Though this year may be, if there is a year for it to happen, it may be this year, because Jeremy Ruckert, who will be a senior this year, came to Ohio State, really highly recruited, and as a wide receiver in high school. I mean, it was known that he was going to play tight end once he got to the college level because of his size and just how he's built. But he played wide receiver in New York, and had to work on the blocking aspects a lot when he first got to Ohio State. And now Kevin Wilson has called him maybe the most complete tight end in the country heading into next season. Obviously, Kevin Wilson a little biased there, but I think it's certainly a conversation. He can do it all, and you saw in bits and pieces last year when Jeremy Ruckert made some very big plays catching the ball. I believe it was against Penn State. He had a couple touchdowns, and then in the college football playoff as well against Clemson, had the big catch against Alabama that got the Buckeyes down into the red zone, took that big hit, still held on to the ball. So he's a talented pass catcher. And, I think Ohio State's going to use that. The issue is you have all these receivers, when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are out there making plays, if you're Justin Fields, for example, are you going to those guys or are you going to go to a tight end? A lot of times you go to the receiver. So, I think that has taken away from them a little bit, but blocking is a big part of what they do. And it's a big part of the offense. And Ohio State has done so well in 12 personnel with two tight ends, one running back, that's something that, they would like to continue to do. But, and that's another thing that came up this week is, you have to have that second tight end. And Jeremy Ruckert was that to Luke Farrell last year. The guy who seems to be the most likely to take that job is Cade Stover, who is a year into a position change, moving from linebacker, where he played as a freshman a few years ago, to tight end. There was a decent amount of buzz around Cade Stover at this time last year. I remember the first day of spring practice, we got to go and watch, and he made a couple nice catches. And, he'd literally been playing the position for, a couple months. He said when we talked to him this week that the biggest thing for him, because he played linebacker, he was used to contact and blocking and things getting off blocks, but he likes that contact. He said the biggest thing for him was the route running, the receiving aspect of it. So he feels like he's made strides in that aspect. His footwork as a blocker is better. So if Ohio State's going to use these two tight end sets that have been really successful, those could be your two guys. And then they have some others, Mitch Rossi, who's much more of a blocking tight end. Joe Royer is a young guy who, similar to Jeremy Ruckert when he first arrived, much more of a receiver, has got to put on weight. I don't know how much you see him this year. Corey Ray, who is a guy who transferred to Ohio State, is a walk-on, but another guy who could kind of do some fullback tight end type of responsibilities. He described himself as a hand in the ground, close to the goal line type of guy. So a lot of options for Ohio State at tight end. Again, I think if there's going to be a receiving threat to come out of it, it's definitely going to be Jeremy Ruckert. But what these guys do is really important to the offense when it comes to the blocking stuff and even sometimes the route running, which opens stuff up for one of the receivers, things like that. But with a young quarterback, I could certainly see more balls going to the tight end kind of as that safety blanket, depending on, the scheme of the play and whatnot.
The Buckeyes continue spring workouts and headed toward the spring game. We got Pat Murphy in the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. So again, join him over there as he cranks out Ohio State football coverage with the rest of the staff there at Bucknuts on a daily basis. Pat, we always appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks.